I'm getting one thumbs up, one thumbs down, split the difference. Next Sunday morning, let me do a promo or a preview for next Sunday morning. Next Sunday morning here, we're going to do for the sermon, the study part of the service, something you may not have seen much at all, or maybe haven't seen it recently. There's going to be 6 preachers. So we're not going to give everybody 30 minutes, but we are going to talk about the subject of the morning in kind of a roundtable discussion for this very, very simple reason. The issue of small groups, the issue of growth groups, support groups, home groups, whatever you want to call them, which we are now calling folds, is something that is not peripheral to the Christian faith. In many respects, it is more important than what we will do here for 75 minutes on a Sunday morning. Because on Sunday mornings for 75 minutes, we're sitting together elbow to elbow, we're all looking in a certain direction. You don't really raise your hand and say, "Could you say that again? I didn't get that." Or you don't really share your stuff because we're in the middle of doing service, and we do service when we do service, right? But the point of small groups, one of the points of small groups, is to do life together. To be vulnerable, to be open, to be transparent, to talk about the journey of faith that you are on, whether it's good or whether it's bad, whether you don't understand it or you think you're the expert. To join with other brothers and sisters that are just walking the journey. And the point that Michelle made this morning was, you can be a Christian for 51 years, and God is still guiding you, God is still taking you deeper. Or some weeks or some months, you may be doing great, but there's a person sitting right next to you that is saying, "I don't get this," or "I'm not sure I want to do this," or "How do I back out of this?" So as we do life together, it's really what sustains us on the journey of faith. We're going to talk about that, and I think it's going to be really beneficial for you. So I promise it won't be 30 times 6. It'll be some number smaller than that. But join us next Sunday morning as we talk about this issue of folds, because they are going to get implemented right away. And I believe your life, your Christian journey will be better because of your involvement in one of those. We're going to talk about this topic this morning. If you want to get your Bibles out, most of our time this morning is going to be in Psalm 46, verse 10. Sometimes when I preach, I know I go to quite a few different places. This one is going to be pretty focused. Psalm 46, verse 10. If you want to get your Bible, your electronic device, whatever you want to get out this morning, we're going to get there in just a second. But as you're making your way there, this is at least a part of this psalm is a very, very familiar scripture passage. If you've been a Jesus follower, if you've been hanging out in church for any period of time, you've probably heard at least part of this psalm, Psalm 46. But the content, the focus of this psalm is as relevant as anything that I or Mark or Monty, our district superintendent, or anybody else could talk about this morning. So I'm asking that you kind of dial in, put those ears on, that we are going to talk about something today that is as relevant as anything that we could talk about at Moses Lake Alliance Church, in this community, in light of what's happening in our world, in light of the journey of faith that you may be on this morning. This is as relevant as it gets. And here's the thing that I want to focus on together with you. That's the bottom part of that first screen. For God to do what only He can do, we need to ensure that we are allowing Him to do it. What God can do, only God can do certain things in our life. For God to do that, we need to make sure that we are allowing Him, we are ensuring Him to do in our lives, in our church, in our community, in our world. We're making sure, yes, I'm allowing you to do that thing that only you can do. I want to read you a passage of Scripture. And as I read this, if you're not at Psalm 46 yet, you can turn your way there. But as I'm reading this passage of Scripture, I'd like you to look at this picture. I'm going to talk about that picture in just a second. So you focus on the picture, And I am going to read for you Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So, we will not fear when earthquakes come and when the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. A river brings joy to the city of our God, the sacred home of the Most High. God dwells in that city. It cannot be destroyed. From the very break of day, God will protect it. The nations are in chaos, and their kingdoms crumble. God's voice thunders, and the earth melts. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Come, see the glorious works of the Lord. See how he brings destruction upon the world. He causes wars to end throughout the earth. He breaks the bow and snaps the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Be still and know that I am God. Let's pray. Father, we are in the middle of doing life, and as we think about what's happening, even this morning as we speak and gather here in Moses Lake, what's happening in Israel, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in the political processes and forces in this country, what's happening with our job, what's happening with our families, what's happening with our health, and the list goes on and on and on. In the middle of doing life, we are really a reflection of what is being talked about in these verses. Chaos and tragedy and earthquakes and violence and everything else. Father, I ask you, I beg of you this morning that in a supernatural way, as it is delivered by your Holy Spirit, you would speak truth in this place this morning. I pray that you would push me to the side so that what is said, what is proclaimed, what is heard for these minutes that are ahead of us is the amazing, almighty, powerful God of the universe taking time to sit down and talk with us from his word. Father, give us ears to listen. Give us the courage to listen. Give us the transparency and the vulnerability that sometimes we don't even extend to ourselves to listen. And then if you should say something to us, by your Holy Spirit this morning, give us the courage and the hunger to obey and do your will. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Picture on the screen. If you grew up in the neighborhood that I grew up in Seattle, and your last name was Samuelson or Skog or Olson or Borg, and you were a male. Didn't matter what you were ultimately going to be, if you were going to be a doctor, lawyer, business executive, accountant, plumber, pastor. Didn't matter what you were going to be. It was almost like a rite of passage within that Scandinavian community that at some point you'd go north to Alaska. And you would spend time on a fishing boat because that's what you do. It was your culture. It's your heritage. That's just the next step in life. So I bit. I took the hook. And as I get ready to go north, late teens, early 20s, you heard all the old grizzled veterans that, interestingly, they walk funny or one arm didn't work quite the same as your left arm did, or, they were looking a little scuffed up. But they'd tell you, this is how it's going to be. And as a young buck who knew everything, sure, whatever. But I found that as the closer we got to the fishing grounds, which for me was the Bering Sea in the middle of the winter, the more attentive I was to the stories. And when we got done sneaking along Vancouver Island and along the coast of Alaska, where you couldn't delay it any longer, and you actually had to go into the Gulf of Alaska to get to the Bering Sea, you were done hiding, and you pull out into open water and you see a 30-foot wave, not spray, a 30-foot wave go over the bow of your boat. You're going, what in the world have I just gotten myself into? So we get there, and I learned that I was on a boat that was skippered by a very interesting guy. I can't talk about that, it would take too long. But his rule in weather like that was, if you can stand up, we fish. Didn't matter what the weather was like. Didn't matter if it was snowing or blowing or the waves were going, the wind was going 80 degrees. If you can stand up on deck, we fish. And oh, by the way, in a crab boat, you can't tie off on anything. Because to tie off on something, it's death. It gets wrapped around your leg. A wave comes, you're over the side. It doesn't work. So you don't have a lasso. You're not tied to anything. And skipper said, you stand up on deck, we fish, because that's how we make money. So here I am as a guy that's thinking, can I go home now? And that was life. And in situations like that, I'm giving you a visual aid. That's the bow of a boat, and if you can't tell, that's water ahead of that boat. That's a picture from the Bering Sea. And they're going to get nailed here in just a second. Grabbing on and holding on as tightly as you can is a natural response. When we face the tough stuff of life, grabbing on to something and holding on as tightly as you can hold on, that's a natural response when we get into heavy seas. Whether it's literally heavy seas, whether it's relationship or finances or health or family, sometimes when it's getting sloppy and the weather's getting bad, we just, I got to hold on here. That's the only way I'm going to survive. We're going to look at Psalm 46:10 this morning. 2 points we're going to lift from this as we study this together. And the first one is this. Psalm 46:10 tells us to do the exact opposite from hold on for all your might. We're going to look at this, we're going to unpack it. But in Psalm 46:10, God, through his word, through his supernatural word to us, tells us the exact opposite of hold on because here it comes. Let's find out what he says in this passage. This instruction in this passage, it's not normal. It's counterintuitive. And it's not easy for us to do when we look at the rough seas and the big waves of our life. But it says in Psalm 46:10, first of all, be still. Now sometimes when we study Psalm 46 in churches and sermons and Bible studies, in Sunday school classes, we look at Psalm 46 verse 10 and we see that be still. And we say to one another, that just means to take a deep breath and relax. What it's saying in Psalm 46:10 is just chill out, just and just go mellow for a while. That's important, and there are verses in Scripture that tell us to do that. But Psalm 46:10 does not tell us to do that. I'll give you 2 Hebrew words this morning. The first one here is rapha, be still. The Hebrew word there is rapha, and this is what it means literally. It means to let go. It means to drop. It means to slacken a grip on something and let it fall. That is what the psalmist, this psalm wasn't written by David, but the psalmist in this psalm, he is telling us, let go. Quit squeezing the daylights out of that rail on the boat when you're getting knocked all over the Bering Sea. Just let go. Let go. Many reasons, I suggest to you, why we hold on to things in the rough seas of life, whether it's our health or whether it's the changing circumstances of a church that in the last 15 to 18 months has maybe to some extent experienced the equivalent of 30-foot waves in the Bering Sea. There are all sorts of things in our life that cause us at times to do what's natural, and and sometimes those things are caused, that action, that response is caused by some things like pride, for example. I want to make a declaration this morning that maybe is obvious, and I've learned in my own experience that things are not obvious if you don't get it. Something can be obvious to this person, but it's not obvious if I don't get it. So I just want to make a clarification statement about pride. First of all, pride is not the same as perseverance. For me to keep on keeping on doing something because I can sort this out if I just keep pounding away on it long enough. Perseverance. That's not the same as pride. Pride is saying, I have the ability to do this on my own. I am the solution to this problem. That's different from perseverance. Another thing that can cause us to hold on when we face the challenging stuff in life is fear. Come on. You saw the weather. And sometimes when we face a doctor report that just knocks the wind out of us, our family is going, what in the world do we do with this news? Or your child. Who you love so much, and you would do anything for, and you would take the pain and the suffering and the inconvenience of loss on their behalf if you could. Steps into something nonetheless. You're fearful. You're fearful of how that whole thing is going to turn out. Sometimes we do this because of control. And control can cause some of us sometimes to do things that really are not allowing God to show up. We say, I'm going, whatever happens in my life, whatever happens in my home, whatever happens in my family, whatever happens on the job, I am going to be in charge. Whatever comes down, I'm going to be behind the steering wheel. I'm not going to be in the passenger seat. Sometimes control can cause us during the crazy weather of life. Psalm 46:10, be still, let go, let it drop. And literally the term means surrender. Look at what he says second. Psalm 46:10, the second part. Be still and know that I am God. If we, then God comes through. Then God comes through. Your second Hebrew word this morning, yada. I'll give you a definition of that in just a second. Middle of June in typical Seattle weather, rainy, wind blowing sideways, and cold, and just a miserable day to be outside. Marcy and I were sitting underneath a gigantic pavilion tent on the campus of the University of Washington because our youngest son was going to receive in that ceremony his master's degree. Big deal in his life, proud moment for us. But I have to let you know that there were times during that ceremony that my mind drifted a little bit because there was more names on the program than just Nate Samuelson. So as they were slogging their way through all those names on the list, I just started thinking to myself, and one of the things I thought was, some of these degrees or some of these schools or some of these departments, I have no idea what that thing even is. And somebody just got a master's degree in it. So as I'm unpacking that whole thing, trying to stay alert and not freeze to death in that beautiful Seattle June weather, I remembered this, which is what the Hebrew word yada means. And it says it in here, be still and know that I am God. That is not data accumulation. That word does not mean take the required classes, read the required books, turn in the required papers, and get this gigantic load of data in your head so that you can receive a master's in public policy. That's not what the word means. The word yada means not data accumulation, but to understand something by experience. It's something you understand because you live it and it impacts your life and it shapes who you are and it forms your decisions. Psalm 34:8 says this. It says in Psalm 34:8, taste and see that the Lord is good. And that's the definition of what it means, be still and know. It means, if you think of taste, to taste something means to take it internally. When I taste something, it goes in my mouth. I eat it. It becomes part of who I am. I experience the reality of that. Psalm 46:10 says to us, be still, let go, let it drop, walk away, surrender, and then, this is cause and effect. Be still, and then you will come to understand that God is God, because you will there see God show up in your midst. Letting go is driven by certain things. Letting go is driven by trust. We sang a song, Debbie led us in a song we sang earlier, talking about trust. A few weeks ago, I preached a sermon here, and I gave you a definition of trust. The word trust means this. Trust means to have a firm confidence in the reliability of someone or something. When we talk about trusting God, it means that we have a firm confidence. We have just kind of a settled confidence in our life. God's reliable. God's reliable. And I can trust him because of his reliability. Trust is one of the things that drives letting go and letting God be God. Humility. Humility for some of us is a challenge, but humility simply means, in Romans chapter 12, it says in 12 of verse 3, and then it's echoed in verse 16, it says, don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. Don't think that you're all that in a bag of chips. Humility. If there's humility in our life, when we go through the things that cause us to be scared to death, or bring us to places where we realize I'm in over my head, that drives the sense of letting go and letting God. Fourth one, desperation. At times, if you are perhaps like me to one degree or another, and I come up against a problem, I say, okay, I can sort this out. So I try plan A, and I try plan B, and I try plan C, and I try plan V, and I maybe get sometimes to plan Z, and nothing. The loved one is still as sick. The circumstances are still overwhelming. Sometimes God does the things in my life that matter to the most when I get to the point of desperation and realize and just grab myself by the scruff of my neck and shake myself and say, I got nothing. I got nothing. A place of desperation at times is a place where a student is more attentive than when they are listening to someone preach or study the word and are thinking, yada, yada, yeah, whatever. Desperation sometimes causes us to let go so that God can be God. A fourth thing, and this is an abbreviated list, there are more, but a fourth thing that helps us let go is remembering Lamentations 3:23. Let's go to Lamentations 3:23. Because if we are facing 30-foot waves, 40-foot waves, at times even higher than that, going over the wheelhouse. And we are going, you want me to let go? You want me just to go? And we're facing, am I going to do that, or is that insanity? One of the things that can push or can help us move toward letting go and letting God is reminders like we get in Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 through 24. Listen. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance, therefore I will hope in him. The chances are pretty good that when you and I come to a place as a Jesus follower, we are experiencing or encountering a rough time in our lives, where the natural tendency is to hold on as tight as we can hold on. If we just take a deep breath and think for a minute, we will realize we've been there before. We've experienced something like that before. And as we think that through and remember in that situation, God has proven to be a faithful God. God solved my problem. He addressed my concern. He took care of the thing that was bothering me. And it says in Lamentation chapter 3, verse 23, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. He will do that again in your life. And as we remember the truth of Lamentation 3:23, sometimes that allows us or it helps us to let go in those places of great storms and chaos around us. It probably won't look, couple disclaimers. When we let go and let God, it probably will not look the way it would when we did it. Why is that? Suggestion. The reason that is because when we let go in God and God starts working in our circumstances, then we have the one who is perfect, who knows perfectly, who does all things perfectly, handle a situation rather than someone who is imperfect and flawed, trying to fix the thing as best they can. That might be one of the reasons why it will look different if God does it than if I cobble together a solution when I run into a crisis in my life. Second disclaimer. It may not happen when we want it to happen. I said a few weeks ago, I think it was a sermon here, I said someplace a few weeks ago, God, when he's doing things in my life, when he's doing things in your life, when he's doing things in this church, when he's doing things in this community, God never looks at my watch to see what time it is. God's got his own timeline. God does things when God wants to do things because he's God. So as we let go and let God and just experience, not know it, but experience that God is going to be God in this situation. Might not conform to our timeline, but God is God. One more picture for you. A couple of takeaways after we look at this picture for just a couple seconds. That's a job site. And thanks, Nick, for putting two pictures on the screen. Nick, above anybody else in this room except for Marcy, probably knows my level of computer competency, but you will see there a fence, and you will see behind the fence that this is a construction project. I don't know if you can see as clearly the sign that's on that fence, and it says this, construction project, or construction site, I think it actually says, construction site, keep out. When we go through the troubles of life, when you got water coming over the bow, or there's more month than money, or whatever the crisis is, sometimes in situations like that, God does not come through because we do not let him on the job site. We don't let him on the job site. We say in our relationship with him, or we say by our decisions or non-decision, keep out. I got it. God can do what God does in situations where we need God to be God. But God will do that only when we ensure that we stay out of his way. And there are things that you and I wrestle with for months. There are things that you and I wrestle with for years. And God can never get to the job site. God is a gentleman. And God will not work in your life. God will not work in my life if I say but out to him. God's not going to do that. Be still and let go. Then God will be God. But sometimes the God thing doesn't happen because, if you will, God is on the outside of the fence, and the fence is saying to God, by my actions or my obedience to him or my surrender to him, got it. Stay away. We don't need you here. And then we will not see, we will not experience, we will not taste God working in our life in a supernatural way. So, a couple things to think about here. Takeaways. Thoughts for you to maybe mull over this morning, beginning and through the week, as we try and apply this. Be still, let go, let it loose, drop it, so that you can experience in your life and in your circumstance God being God when we allow him to be God. A few things that maybe will help you with that. First one, areas in our lives this morning where we are white-knuckling it. This is an opportunity for you just to have some transparent reflection. Are there areas in your life, my life, this church, this neighborhood, this community? Are there areas in our lives right now where we are? Think about it for a second. Jot them down. Hearing the fact that sometimes God does things that are the result of us doing counterintuitive things, like letting go. Where might you be white-knuckling it today? Second one. Reason why letting go sounds like a real bad idea. First one asks you, do you have any white-knuckle things? The second one is giving us an opportunity to reflect. Why have we decided that we're going to take the white-knuckle approach to this? In some of those situations, what might you, what might I, what might we be wrestling with that says, this is a real bad idea if we let this drop right now? If we let go, we surrender and just say, hands off. What is convincing us, what is convincing you that no, you don't want to do that? Third, how might we leave this place encouraged and at peace by the promise that we are given in Psalm 46, 10, and 11? I'm going to connect verse 11 to 10 this time. Listen one more time. Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world. Now, verse 11. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Let go, let God. Let's pray. Father, one of the disciples said to Jesus when Jesus asked him, are you going to walk away here? Is this the place where you say, I've had enough of being a Jesus follower? And that disciple, Father, thank you for the example. His response to Jesus was, where would I go? You alone have the words of life. So, Father, as we go through situations in our lives and in this church and in our community, and we see the news and the Middle East is on fire and Ukraine is in humanity for week after month after month. The seas are a little choppy. We're taking water over the wheelhouse, and it's not spray, it's blue water, it's a wave. And we confess that sometimes our tendency is to hold on tighter. Father, I just pray that in my life and in our lives, and by extension, Moses Lake Alliance Church and this community, we would grab onto this verse today and say, I'm going to do it. Because God in my life has proven to be a faithful God. He has proven to be a God that I can trust. I am going to allow him to work in this situation. I believe he will bring good out of bad. Feed us from this verse this day. Feed us from this passage this week. We trust you to do that. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.